Welcome back to the Incite Club, and today we're talking about the assumptions we make about our shadows. Stay tuned.
The first rule of Incite Club is you don't talk about Incite Club. You do Incite Club. The second rule of Incite Club is the only assumptions we make about one another are that we all want happiness and we all want to avoid suffering. The third rule of Incite Club is you check all your other assumptions at the door. We hope these conversations will bring you insights that incite you to action. Welcome to Incite Club. That bass line is everything.
Yes,
I love it.
I'm glad that you mentioned that as well because one assumption that we were discussing yesterday with the band was that most people don't appreciate the bass and they're just listening to the guitar, and I was like, I always love the bass, and here's proof that I'm not the only one.
Yes. Sometimes it's so important we miss it.
Yeah.
Right? Oftentimes the bass line is what makes a song a song. Like think about Under Pressure by Queen and David Bowie. That's what makes that song that song. And
Yes.
something can become here's a transferable lesson. Something can be so vital we don't even know it's there. We just take it for granted.
And I'm gonna take on that to do this segue here because the baseline is kind of like the shadow that we're talking as well. It's running the show under everything. It's what makes something exciting, like moves us in there, and it's also something a little bit more. It's a lower frequency. It's dark and so on. But if we don't pay attention, sometimes it does something that it feels really weird and we don't even know what it is because we're not even paying attention, we're not really listening. Like if a bass line goes to a wrong note, it feels really weird, but you can't really tell as you can tell when the guitar goes to something wrong or when the singer does something wrong, you know.
Oh wow, my whole body just broke out in goosebumps and I'm like, am I learning all of the secrets of the universe right now in this moment? I think I am.
Yeah. We just started with the secrets of the universe with frequency here.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Thank you. Yeah, it's not the part we sing along to.
Yes.
And again, we might not even notice it's there. And the bass player is like, if you're performing on stage, the bass player is usually behind, the guitar player or the singer up front. It's carrying us along. And we can dance to it if we are listening. But if we're not listening, we're like, where's this song going? It doesn't feel so good.
Yeah. And we got to go ahead. I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, this just feels really so. Just before we started recording, I was telling you about a book I've just started reading, and an approach to shadow. I'll finish this thought. An approach to shadow that is about dancing with it and romancing with it. And she starts the book. So the book is Existential Kink by Carolyn Elliott, PhD. And
I love the title, by the way.
Amazing, right? And she starts the book by doing a reframe of the Persephone myth. And the Persephone myth, the way we're used to hearing it is, Persephone is this young maiden, and Hades, Pluto, the god of the underworld, kidnaps her and makes her his queen. And she's distraught, or he tricks her into eating the seeds of the pomegranate, and so she has to stay in the underworld. And at a very surface, like I remember reading this myth as a kid, and it's an explanation for why there's winter and why there's spring. For 6 months of the year, Persephone the maiden is underground, and so that's why you have winter. A very a very clean version. And Dr. Elliott's kind of re-envisioning of that myth is not even so much a re-envisioning, but like a reminder that long before there was Persephone, there was Kali, there were, like goddess of destruction. And so she's like, well, what if this female force pre-exists splits herself in two, creates her own shadow, right? The lover who kidnaps her, who's violent, who ravishes her, but creates that to experience life, which is a cosmology that makes sense to me. Like, I hadn't thought of it specifically as a female creator splitting off, but as a oneness going, I'd like to experience life, and then creating. And you have that in your song reactions. And you state it so beautifully. Like, it's one of my absolute favorite songs, and part of that is because you're able to take this massively significant cosmological truth and put it in a song lyric. It's like
that you can dance along
one broke itself into a million pieces to be able to experience itself through a trillions of cells. I'm like, oh yeah,
yes.
you just summed it up. There you go. Anyway,
Yeah.
so that view of creation and that view of shadow there's something really sexy and romantic about it. Like this idea that she is creating a lover who is not really kind to her, but is doing it to experience all that life has to offer. And so the shadow energy becomes something we can dance with. Oh, and I think we lost connection. Man, talk about shadow energy taking things over. I broke the internet. All right. Well, if you're tuned in and watching live and you can still see us, we're having some technical difficulties, but we will get them resolved. Yeah, so I don't know if anybody who's watching has read this book. If you are interested in it, Lise and I were chatting before we started recording about just even like a title, a provocative title like that. A book called Existential Kink. It makes you think twice before asking for it at the library or buying it in a bookstore or telling somebody that's what you're reading. Yay, we're back.
We're back. I got kicked off. The light went off, but
oh no, did you lost your internet?
I lost my internet, and we stopped when you were talking about so our shadow, and
yeah, it's still okay. That's so I have no concept of what's being broadcast because the timer's still running on my end. Like, it never stopped. It never stopped going. So I don't know if we kept broadcasting or not. Oh, and now I've lost audio for you.
maybe it was still streaming.
Oh, there you go.
So
Yeah.
Can you just update me so that I can catch up?
Yes. But this idea of the shadow as something that it has like a kind of dark, sexy, romantic presence. It's something we dance with. It's something we relate to. Like you were saying about the baseline, where it has that feeling of excitement. And this is such a prevalent theme in human sexuality and human romantic relationships, this darkness of, oh, it feels good to be kind of bad. And we generally want to create like boundaries and containers around that, right? Like, it feels good up to this point and everybody's got a different threshold, right? And so for some people it's like, oh, it feels kind of good to like be out in public and pretend we don't know each other and we're being naughty even though we've been married for 10 years or whatever it is. And then for some people it's like, oh, let's really explore and push the boundaries. And these things are generally called kinks, right? Like, oh, well, I like this dark secret thing and I like this dark secret thing. And we make the assumption that those are bad, that they need to be extricated, that they need to be separated from the part of us who's really good. But this creation myth about like this reimagined creation myth around Persephone and Pluto is, she is all of these things. She externalized the kind of almost like a Jekyll and Hyde, but with a happy ending. She externalized the bad parts of herself, but not to get rid of them, to be able to interact with them and explore them.
I love that perspective. That Persephone, that perspective.
Yeah.
Yes. That's a powerful myth, and actually, such a powerful myth that even Disney like kinda picked it up on it on a few stories in a clear way.
Which ones are you thinking of? Which
I was
story?
thinking of Beauty and the Beast. Even like
Oh,
there's
yeah.
uh, that thing of uh, the the damsel and being like uh, trapped by a beast or something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's that duality that sometimes we have in the myths, and then Disney is full of myths reimagined either way. So yeah, there's a lot of things to be explored.
Yeah, and even the I thought you were gonna say the Beast himself, right? Because he used to be this
Yeah,
handsome prince, and then he's turned into, like, only the shadow side of him, because not only is he grotesque to look at, but he's mean and angry and, all of the darker qualities, the lower vibrations. Um, and then what brings him back? It's being loved, being
yeah.
accepted, right? Like, being reintegrated.
The shadow
Um
being seen in a positive look.
Yeah, but I think it's really pertinent to talk about Disney because they're a culture creator, right? And in my lifetime, Disney is perhaps the most impactful culture creator. And I grew up with parents who were really not into television and not into popular culture and stuff like this. So I got pretty low doses of the culture drivers, but it really seeps in. I mean, it somehow just gets into the airwaves and you know about characters even though your parents are like, "We've never shown you that movie. Where did you get
How do
that?"
you know?
Yeah, yeah. So they're a huge culture creator and well known for taking stories that have been in the mythology for a long, long time and creating the versions that most people know,
Yeah,
right? So creating, like, when we think of the story, often think of the Disney story. And that, that should make us pause and go, we're assuming that they're just entertaining us, but they're taking these world myths and
programming.
redelivering. Yeah, they're redelivering them to us and programming us. And I would say always with the shadow repressed. So all the dark evil queens, all of the villains, right? It's the shadow repressed. And then the good girl, there's a lot of good girl programming, right? The
Yeah,
heroines are very sweet, very innocent, childlike voices, even if they're supposed to be old enough to be getting married soon. Lots of, maybe creepy dark undertones about sexualizing innocence,
yeah.
basically. Um,
And
and no wonder, like, no wonder we're all so repressed. No wonder we hate our shadows.
and actually that's something that came to my mind as well when I mentioned Disney, and going back to the way you put the Persephone myth, like
Yeah.
being Kali being broken down into tools to be able to experience all of that. Uh, and we could even argue three because there's the mother in that myth as well, the method.
Yes. Yes. Demeter.
So,
Yeah.
but I was thinking, yeah, and maybe Kali needed to broke herself into these different versions because the feminine is always so portrayed as good and like benevolent, graceful, and so on. So it's kind of like to be able to integrate the shadow, you kind of need the masculine version for it.
Mm.
And like generalizing that maybe is an assumption because when we see a character that is a man who's like the beast, for example, and he has all these negative qualities, or like even like the bad boys in movies and so on, it is kind of like something that even draws our attention. But when it's a woman that has that kind of quality, usually it's more like just a mean woman. It's not integrated as well as these more shadowy uh, energies in men.
Oh, that's so interesting. So the Beast's arc line is I'm mean and terrible to everyone, but when a woman loves me, then I can come back into society. But the evil queens just have to get murdered.
Yes, you never see the evil queen get like accepted and loved, and then she's back into
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Even Darth Vader got to be, reintegrated.
Uh,
But, not
Maybe
that.
that's an assumption, but it is kind of sad.
Yeah. Well, that I think it can be a helpful way to look at it because then look at the fallout from that, right? So we have these assumptions that when women are powerful, they're very dangerous, they're aggressive. But the same is true. Like if men aren't aggressive enough, what's wrong with you?
Mm, yeah.
So these maybe it's like the core assumption that we're different is a big part of the challenge as opposed to we we're fortunate enough to have these different expressions and iterations of energy in human form so
Yeah.
that we can like invite each other back into unity.
Yeah.
They're like
Mm.
complementary energies, right? And you can invite one another back into like, oh, we're
And,
we're part
and
of Earth energy.
And I would even argue that one of the biggest shadows of women, it's exactly in what you were mentioning with the book in there as well. Like, oh, what kind of person are you reading a book like Existential Kink, which you mentioned before that where you heard about the book, the person who mentioned it felt like she needed to explain the
Yes.
book after the title.
Yeah.
Um, One of the shadows of women is actually not that side that we usually think of, oh, repressed anger and so on, even though it can be in there as well. But it's actually that need to be accepted and to be good, and that need to like make sure that everyone is well, and like even downplaying ourselves sometimes, or like repressing ourselves to make sure that we don't step into other people's toes. That's actually a shadow, because that can create a lot of repressed energy that rules the show, like the baseline we were talking in a little bit out of tune thing. That yeah, and sometimes that rolls into a lot of worst things than if we just were a little bit more assertive.
Okay, that's huge. If I'm understanding what you just said, it was that the things we assume are our good qualities are are actually our shadows.
Yeah,
So no wonder so many people feel like, "Oh, I've been taught to be good my whole life, but it feels really um icky. It feels like we have this term people pleaser,
yeah,
right? And when we talk about it, we're usually aware that that's a negative thing and it's part of the shadow. But like, what if it's because the whole thing is a shadow that being good? Like, so we've made the assumption that the that these things are good, but they're actually our shadow expressions in the sense that they're not so I guess there's a couple different ways shadow is coming up because these would be shadow in the sense that they follow us and haunt us, but aren't really us,
yeah,
as opposed to like the shadow we're dancing with. And I guess it's the same, right? There's something to learn from there. But if I think the shadow is me, I I'm talking of Disney movies, I'm thinking about Peter Pan and his shadow. And he felt, oh, this is interesting. I wonder like how Jungian the writers were on this movie. But he cut like the book starts or the movie starts where he has become separated from his shadow and his shadow is going and making mischief and doing things without him. But he also feels like really unwhole and incomplete without his shadow, and he needs it to be sewn back on by a young woman, of course. Um, but the assumption, I just really want to bookmark that for myself. We may be assuming these qualities are the things to strive for when in fact they're our shadow.
Yeah. Or to be integrated in a
Yeah.
way, because it's not that we were talking from the beginning that the shadow is not something that is necessarily bad, but it needs to be integrated to be ruling the show, but in the right note, right?
Yeah. But that makes sense to me that if I'm living in my shadow, like no wonder things feel dark and I feel disconnected and I feel like I'm not really whole. Because I'm over identifying with these things that um I don't know, they're like from the upside down.
Yeah, and that I'm trying to make sense of this as I'm speaking, so try to follow along with me.
Okay.
I'm going back to that baseline. If the baseline is, I'm not gonna say half tone down or up, but like a little bit in between two notes in there, it will feel off enough that it feels wrong, but maybe not off enough that we actually realize that there's something wrong, as if it was completely wrong. So for me, this feels like that kind of shadow that it, it is accepted enough to feel like, oh yeah, there's just something that feels a little bit weird, but I don't know what it is, so let's just keep rolling. But it's that string that is just a little bit of the out of tune, because we haven't looked uh, further enough to see that, oh yeah, I just need to make some adjustments along the way so that I can have this part of my personality working for me and not against me.
So from that, it sounds like there's great benefit in coming into relationship with aspects of our shadow that are really dissonant, because
Mm.
that's what draws our attention to the dissonance.
Yeah, and then we can actually realize, oh, I need to do some work on this.
Yeah. Yeah, I had this experience this week where um I got really mad about something. A loving friend asked me a question, like just the right question. And it was basically, she's like, I don't think I don't think this is only about that. Right. That's basically all she said. Like, she just listened. She's like, I don't think that's only about that, which sent me thinking and exploring and discovering, which led to a huge revelation, which led to a huge creative outburst, which led to connecting with a lot of people. And I was like, I know that's my pattern, that I have some kind of um, conflict, and then it brings me into the depths, and then I feel it, and then I write it, and then I connect, and it always makes magic. And so I go around all the time with the assumption I need to be more connected to God. I need to be more connected to my audience. No, I need to go through more hard shit. Like, that's really what I need. If I want to live my most creative, expressive life, if I want to be able to write content that connects with people and immediately makes them go like, I know exactly what you're talking about. I have felt this way. Oh my God, you're talking directly to my heart. I need to go through more shadow shit. I need to get face to face with like, oh, that's a part of me that's, real ugly. Why is it so ugly? Oh, because this is what it's really afraid of. And
Mm.
then, sew that part back onto my shadow.
Yeah, yeah. That I've seen a few videos that one of my clients, Carissa, shared with me about. I can't remember her name now. It's a coach that teaches people about coaches people around fame and being famous.
Oh, okay.
And one thing that she said really stuck with me, because she was mentioning that our ability to be famous is directly correlated to our ability to be misunderstood, because part of what keeps us from being seen from a lot of people, which she just said, fame is basically having the resource of attention of millions of people, or thousands of people, whatever it is. So it's just attention. And if we feel, our subconscious feel threatened by being seen and having the attention, and for some reason, either because we're going to feel misunderstood, or be separated from our the people that are close to us, or have a physical threat or of some sort, we don't allow ourselves to have it because we're afraid. So this shadow of wanting to get everyone feeling good and feeling well, and it's directly correlated to that, actually, because if you don't want to piss anyone off, and you want to, like, you don't want to feel misunderstood and so on, of course you're gonna be uh in the back to avoid threatening anyone, to not be threatened either. And that actually was what started me thinking, like, so maybe some assumptions that I get, that, oh, that person shouldn't do that because uh they're bothering someone with that, and that's doesn't not necessary, or that person it should, like, all the shoulds, right? Or I shouldn't say something that would hurt someone. uh Maybe it's not that that's necessarily wrong, but it's the shadow that the assumption that I had, shadow that I had of thinking, like, but I don't want to, I don't need to hurt anyone with this, so why do this? But sometimes people say things in a very, like, not to be mean, it's just that they're just being spontaneous, and someone can get hurt on that, or someone can get offended. So if I accept when people say something that can be offensive uh, outside, why am I repressing when I have something, some comment or some opinion that too afraid to be misunderstood, so I'm not gonna say.
Yeah. That I've being afraid of being misunderstood. Ooh, I hear that so much. I just witnessed that this morning on social media, with somebody sharing something that for me really landed. Like as soon as I read it, I was like, oh, I've never heard that before, but that is just my soul immediately recognizes that's true. And somebody else commented, no one knows what you're talking about, to the person who made this statement. And so being in a little bit of a like feisty mood, I responded saying, I know exactly what she's talking about.
I understand that's not for you.
Yeah. And then she replied, and I felt like actual genuine excitement as I made my final reply, which was like, yay, we each get to have our own takeaway. um which for me was growth, right? Like feeling like, oh, I can see the beauty of this. We each get to have our own takeaway. Yours is clearly wrong. No, I didn't say that, but clearly it's wrong. Because it was like this universal statement, right? It was actually objectively wrong. No one knows what you're talking about. I was like, well, that can't be true because I'm someone. But I just was so in love with the courage that the person who created the statement in the first place had in responding. I mean, that's just, it's a tough energy to be in, right? If you say something and you mean it genuinely and somebody else is like, not only does that not make sense, but then it went on into like projecting you're being manipulative, you're doing this, you're just trying to get people's attention and you're telling them
Mm.
things that aren't true, you're hurting them. There was a lot of real like vitriol directed back to the author of this post. I was just
I'm
holding,
curious about
I'll
what she
share it
said.
with you. Yeah, I'll share it with you. But it was like I just was holding her in so much love, going like, "Oh, you like please take away from this the lesson that exactly what you're saying, Lise, that you are being visible enough." And people talk about this with visibility on social media, right? It's like, you know, when you start getting people who are angry at you, who are, you know, giving you venom back, that's how you know you're being visible enough, because you've gotten outside of that kind of shallow end of the pool where it's people who
Yeah,
know you and like you and you used to work with or you went to high school with or you know,
yeah,
whatever it is, people who feel, who either genuinely like you or feel obligated to be polite.
yeah,
And you've now broken through to like the world at large.
yeah. I felt like my ability to hold space to be misunderstood was being a little bit like tested, and maybe it's the thing that I know that I need to work with a little bit more, because generally, even though usually I'm not trying to not like to avoid saying things that might be perceived in one way or the other, I feel like I'm pretty clean, and like maybe it's just like in that shadow, right? Like I kind of know some of the things that I say in public and some of the things that I don't say in public. So maybe it's a time to start testing a little bit more my ability to be misunderstood.
I love it. Oh, I'm here for that project.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's such a I think that's such a beautiful constructive way of framing it, because we sometimes mistakenly think the opposite of being kind or polite is being brutal or getting in people's faces and intentionally trying to get a rise out of them. And those both can make us feel pretty lousy, but expanding my capacity for being misunderstood. So that seems like that could be like a really fun self challenge or game, you know.
Yeah.
What can I say that I think is not I think is rude or mean spirited, but what can I say that I think is kind of wacky?
Yeah. Kind of kinky.
Yeah. How can I share my kink
Uh,
today?
yeah. Yeah, it's so funny because I think like, oh yeah, of course I'm not gonna say something just to offend someone, but we never know what's going to offend someone. So I feel like it's more about not self censoring than about uh oh, I need to say something that's going to trigger today, because we know there are people that actually love that.
Yes.
It's their kink and they own it. But for someone like me, it's more like just yeah. What is that I'm self censoring that maybe I can just let out in the world?
That's beautiful. That seems like a way of hugging your shadow back into you instead of going like, "Oh, well, you stay over there." I no, I'm going outside and I can't be seen with you.
Yes. Let me just separate from it and live separated and miss that part. Like the
Yeah, and then the shadow's like, "Oh, well, if I'm not there with you, I guess I'm there on my own, unsupervised. I'm gonna pop out
yes,
in some weird, awkward way."
and poke on you when you less expect, which is
Yeah,
what usually happens.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. What's your big insight from this conversation? I can't stop having them. I'm just like, oh,
I feel
multiple
like
insights. Whew.
this was so big that even my house went in shadow for a moment.
We blew the power out.
We blew the power out. I don't know. I actually really loved when you brought that insight, even with Disney movies, of the separation of the shadow so that it can be experienced. in the Persephone myth, but also with the uh, Peter Pan movie.
Mm.
Um,
Now I'm so curious about, I mean, and obviously it's a book before it's a movie, and it's a play maybe even before it's a book. And so, but now I'm like so curious that, was anybody working on that movie and going like, hey, let's throw in some Jungian shit.
yes, actually, that's still reverberating in my mind, and I'm actually feeling like I want to watch that movie again so that I can integrate a few things that maybe I haven't picked up without the perspective that you're bringing up.
Yeah. And of course it's Pan, right? Like the character Peter Pan is a
Another
representation
myth.
of Pan.
Oh, I love that.
uh,
Yeah.
I'm loving what you shared about increasing our capacity for being misunderstood. And that feels like it really beautifully complements just some other themes that are, like already unfolding for me. Themes around wanting to be perceived as really responsible, that goes along with wanting to be liked or not, create waves or things like that, and not be misunderstood, right?
Yeah.
Because if I'm misunderstood, then of course I can be perceived as mean-spirited or unintelligent or anything else that's a quality that I'm like, no, not that.
And even the ability to be misunderstood without allowing it to put us in such a cold defensive mode that we become the evil queen,
Yeah.
so that we can be misunderstood and still remain graceful.
Yes, not make the being misunderstood our new shadow identity. Well, I'm misunderstood. I will go live in a dark tower and cast curses
Now
on
you're
you
gonna
all.
see. Now you're gonna see the evil era.
Yeah. You think I'm mean now? Just wait until I put a tower of thorns around you. Oh man. So what would be a good insight? What would be a good action to think about? We were both talking about we still haven't started our assumption notebook.
Yeah, maybe the assumption book can or journal can have a part of like mm, things that like the kinks, like you mentioned, the things that we are afraid to be misunderstood for, things that we are and that we're open to integrate. Maybe we're starting a whole journal. This should be on Amazon to buy.
There you go. Yeah. Well, that really appeals to
Yeah.
me. And I think where I got a little bit stuck on the assumption journal was writing down the assumption takes a few more steps, right? Because there's like the initial conflict or friction, but then I would need to go through and do
Reframe.
some uncovering, yeah, to figure out what that assumption is. But
Yeah.
if it's what am I not accepting about myself, then it's closer to the surface.
Yeah.
And
And
so it could even be like, dear God, please don't let anybody think I'm. And then a list.
that's perfect. Yes. And then maybe the question from that we can get like what assumption that I have that makes me feel like this is bad, because
Yeah.
there was another insight in this episode that was pre-episode, that's why I haven't mentioned, but I want you to reread that phrase that you told me about and about the book,
Uh-huh.
that pleasure without approval phrase. Can you read that to
Yeah, yeah,
please
yeah.
for
And again,
anyone who watches?
this is from the book Existential Kink by Carolyn Elliott, PhD. So she starts with fear is excitement without the breath, as Fritz Perl said. Well, often sensations that we experience as terrible or painful are just pleasure without approval.
Hmm. Yes.
And that's just the introduction.
We can
So I'm plugging this book. I don't know the author. This book was just recommended to me, but I'm plugging it. It's a good one.
I feel like we can end the episode with that phrase and leave for the listeners, watchers to reflect on it as well.
Can't wait to hear what everybody thinks
What
about it.
pleasures without approval do we have?
And I feel so much freer knowing probability says at least one person is going to misunderstand and now have a view of me that I'm really kinky.
Yes.
Yay for being misunderstood.
Don't you have a sense of excitement about that as well?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
freedom. And
Yeah.
freedom. Like the instead of holding that fear inside of me, instead of being ruled by, but this could happen as a result. Like, great, let's make it happen.
I love it.
Let's make it
Yeah.
happen. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, everybody. And until next time, hope you're filled with lots of insights and incited into action.
Yeah. And allow your kinks to be approved. Take care.